I first laid copper along the edge of my garden beds in 1973, not because I had read about it somewhere, but because my father had done it before me, and in his garden the slugs never destroyed a single head of lettuce. I've been doing the same ever since. 52 years, still no slugs. Meanwhile, 67 million American gardeners spent an average of $112 last season on slug control products that stopped working the moment rain hit the soil. I thought everyone used this method, so now you'll learn our family secret. Every spring, I watched my neighbors do the same thing. Buy the pellets, lose the lettuce, buy more pellets. According to the National Gardening Association's 2023 Gardening Market Report, American home gardeners lose an estimated $2.1 billion worth of produce and ornamental plants annually to pest damage. And slugs account for the single largest share of that loss in temperate climates. Slugs are not a minor nuisance. A single mature slug can consume 3 times its body weight in plant matter per night. A modest infestation of 30 slugs in a 10 by 12 raised bed can strip seedlings to stems within 72 hours. Lettuce, hostas, strawberries, basil, gone before morning. The industry solution is pellets, specifically metaldehyde or iron phosphate granules sold under brands like Scott's Slug B-Gon, Bayer Advanced Slug and Snail Killer, and Monterey Sluggo. The retail price point sits between $12.99 and $18.99 per container. Each container treats approximately 2,000 square feet. Once, one application, one rain event later, the pellets dissolve, degrade, and lose effectiveness entirely. For a gardener with 400 square feet of beds, a single treatment costs roughly $4 to $6. That sounds reasonable until the math compounds. A typical growing season runs April through October, 7 months. In a moderate rainfall climate, effective pellet coverage requires reapplication every 2 to 3 weeks. That is a minimum of 10 application cycles per season. At $5 per treatment, the annual cost reaches $50. Over 5 years, $250. Over 10 years, $500. For a problem that was never permanently solved, only temporarily suppressed every single time. That is not a gardening expense. That is a subscription. A subscription the industry designed, priced, and has collected on for over 60 years. And it continues to collect because the one-time alternative was erased from mainstream gardening culture before most people reading this were born. My father never explained the science. He just said copper confuses them. He was right. And it took until 1985 for a university to explain exactly why. A 30-foot roll of self-adhesive copper tape costs $3.97 at Home Depot or Amazon. One roll, one purchase. The mechanism is electrochemical and immediate. When a slug's mucous membrane contacts copper, the metal reacts with the biological compounds in the slime to generate a small but detectable electric current, functionally identical to the reaction in a galvanic battery. The slug receives a signal it cannot override. It reverses direction every single time. It cannot adapt. It cannot develop resistance. Copper does not wash away in rain. Copper does not degrade in UV. Copper does not require reapplication. One roll of copper tape, applied correctly, permanently protects a raised bed for the operational life of the structure, which, for cedar or composite beds, is 15 to 25 years. The lifetime cost of chemical pellets for one standard 4x8 raised bed, $500 to $700 over 10 years. The lifetime cost of copper tape for the same bed, $4. Once, forever. Copper tape cannot lose its effectiveness because its effectiveness is physics, not chemistry. Physics does not expire. The electrostatic repulsion mechanism of copper against gastropod mucus was formally documented in a 1985 study conducted by researchers at the University of California, Davis, published in the journal Hort Science, which demonstrated a 98.2% deterrence rate in controlled slug exposure trials using copper barriers as thin as 1 centimeter wide. The USDA Agricultural Research Service independently confirmed these findings in 1992, noting that copper barriers represented a viable, zero-chemical alternative to molluscicide applications and recommending their use in integrated pest management programs for small-scale producers. That recommendation was published. It was distributed. It was subsequently absent from virtually every consumer-facing gardening guide produced by companies with a financial interest in selling chemical alternatives. The historical record runs deeper than laboratory studies. Victorian-era English gardeners in the 1880s routinely lined cold frames and glass house staging with copper sheeting to protect seedlings from slug damage. The practice was documented in the 1894 edition of the Royal Horticultural Society's Journal of Horticulture and Cottage Gardener as universally effective and requiring no renewal. Japanese market gardeners in the Meiji period, between 1868 and 1912, used copper wire wound around the bases of ceramic planters for identical purposes. The technique was so standard, it required no explanation in contemporary agricultural texts. This is proven technology. It predates synthetic pesticides by half a century. It was not replaced because something better was invented. It was replaced because something more profitable was invented. I never understood why nobody talked about this. Then I looked at who was paying for the silence. The residential molluscicide market, slug and snail killers specifically, was valued at $890 million globally in 2023, according to Mordor Intelligence Market Research. The North American segment accounts for approximately $310 million of that figure annually. 3 companies dominate that market. Scott's Miracle-Gro, which controls roughly 40% of the U.S. residential pesticide retail space through its Ortho and Scott's branded product lines. Bayer AG's Crop Science division, which markets Bayer advanced consumer products through mass retail channels. And Neudorf, the European market leader whose Sluggo and Pheromol products hold significant market share in the organic and premium gardening segment. The business model is architecturally dependent on product failure. Metal-to-hide pellets dissolve in water. That is not a design flaw. It is the design. Iron phosphate granules are biologically consumed as they work, effective but self-eliminating. Every single application removes itself from the equation, guaranteeing the customer returns. Scott's reported $1.3 billion in consumer lawn and garden segment revenue in fiscal year 2023. Bayer's Crop Science Consumer Division contributes approximately 800 million euros annually to its parent company. These are not numbers generated by solving problems. These are numbers generated by managing them. A copper tape market at $4 per customer per lifetime generates approximately 27 cents in annual recurring revenue, assuming a 15-year product lifespan. Scott's pellet model generates $50 per customer per season. The copper solution is not a competitor to their product. It is an extinction-level threat to their revenue model. The 1992 USDA recommendation was not acted upon at the retail level. Extension office literature that referenced copper barriers was quietly updated through the late 1990s and 2000s to emphasize integrated approaches, language that invariably included chemical options as primary recommendations. The gardening media ecosystem, funded in part by advertising from Scott's, Bayer, and Spectrum brands, did not run copper tape as a cover story. The information was not banned by law, it was erased by economic gravity. The result is identical. The complete materials list for one standard 4x8 raised bed, one 30-foot roll of self-adhesive copper tape, 1-inch width, $3.97, one roll of isopropyl alcohol wipes for surface prep, already in your home, or $149 for a travel pack. Total investment, $3.97 to $5.46. Step 1. Clean the exterior rim of the raised bed with isopropyl alcohol. Copper tape requires a grease-free surface to adhere permanently. Wipe the top 4 inches of all exterior walls and allow to dry for 60 seconds. Step 2. Measure the perimeter of the bed. A standard 4x8 bed has a 24-foot perimeter. A 30-foot roll covers this with 6 feet remaining for repairs or a second application layer. Step 3. Apply the copper tape to the exterior face of the bed rim, approximately 1 inch below the top edge. Press firmly along the entire length. At corners, cut the tape and overlap by ½ inch. Do not attempt to fold, as folded copper tape creates gaps in the galvanic field. Step 4. Run a second strip directly above the first, overlapping by 1/4 inch. 2 parallel strips double the effective barrier width and ensure no slug can bridge the gap between them with body contact alone. Step 5. Press the full length of tape with a credit card or rigid flat edge to eliminate air pockets. Air pockets allow moisture intrusion that can lift adhesive within 1 season. The installation is complete. Total time, 12 minutes. For installation on terracotta pots, the process is identical. Copper tape adheres directly to unglazed terracotta without primer. For glazed ceramic pots, clean with acetone rather than isopropyl alcohol before application, as the glaze surface requires a stronger degreaser for permanent adhesion. For in-ground beds without a physical border, the advanced technique is copper mesh, stapled to wooden stakes driven at 6-inch intervals around the bed perimeter. 4-inch wide copper mesh, available for $11.99 per 10-foot roll, creates a vertical barrier that extends 2 inches above and 2 inches below soil level, blocking subterranean slug entry as well as surface approach. Total cost for a 4x8 perimeter using this method, $28.97. Still a one-time purchase, still permanent. Total cost for standard tape installation, $3.97. Total cost for advanced mesh installation, $28.97. Total cost of Scott's pellets over 10 years for the same bed, $500. A $4 roll of copper tape is not slug control for raised beds. A $4 roll of copper tape is permanent electrochemical pest deterrents for every surface-dwelling gastropod threat on a residential property. Application 1. Container gardens and patio pots. Every single potted plant on a deck or patio is accessible to slugs via the container wall. Copper tape applied around the base of each pot creates an impassable barrier. 1 roll covers 12 standard 12-inch pots. Application 2. Cold frames and greenhouse staging. Victorian gardeners used this exact method in the 1880s for this exact reason. A cold frame with copper-lined edges cannot be infiltrated by slugs emerging from surrounding soil during warm, wet nights. Period when seedlings are most vulnerable and least replaceable. Application 3. Tree and shrub protection. Young fruit trees and ornamental shrubs are vulnerable to slug feeding at the root collar. The zone where stem meets soil. Copper tape wrapped around the base of the trunk, 2 inches above soil level, permanently blocks this access point. Nurseries charge $8 to $15 for pre-treated slug collars for young trees. The material cost using copper tape, £9 per tree. Application 4. Strawberry beds and low-growing fruit. Slugs cause an estimated 15% annual yield loss in home strawberry production, according to the RHS advisory data from 2021. A copper-bordered strawberry bed eliminates that loss permanently. A gardener growing strawberries for 15 years saves the entire value of their harvest yield loss, compounding annually against a one-time $4 investment. Application 5. Indoor houseplants and seedling trays. Slugs enter homes through foundation gaps and drainage holes. A copper tape ring applied around the interior base of a seedling tray or around the drainage hole of an indoor pot creates a barrier that functions identically indoors as outdoors. Particularly relevant for gardeners overwintering tender plants in garages or basements where slug populations establish without outdoor predator pressure. Application 6. Raised pond and water feature edging. Slugs consume aquatic plant margins and lily pads at water level. Copper tape applied to the interior rim of above-ground pond liners deters slug entry at the waterline and carries the secondary benefit of mild antimicrobial properties that reduce algae adhesion on the tape surface itself. The point is not that copper tape solves every garden problem. The point is that a $4 roll of copper tape solves a $500 problem permanently across every surface, every structure, and every application where slug access is the threat. And the industry selling you the $500 solution has known that since 1985. My father's copper is still in the ground. So is mine. Neither of us ever wrote a check to Scott's. Option 1. Spend $50 this season on Scott's Slug Be Gone, then $50 next season, then $50 the season after that. Over 10 years, that is $500 spent on a problem that was never solved, only temporarily delayed every single time while the company collected the difference. Option 2. Spend $4 once, install it in 12 minutes, never buy a slug product again. The 10-year cost difference between those two options is $496. Over a gardening lifetime of 25 years, the average tenure of a committed home gardener according to the National Gardening Association, the gap reaches 1,246 songs against a one-time $4 purchase. A 30-foot roll of copper tape is available right now on Amazon for $3.97 with next-day delivery, or at Home Depot in the gardening section for the same price. The search term is self-adhesive copper tape 1-inch. Do not purchase the foil tape sold for crafts, which is too thin and carries no adhesive backing rated for outdoor use. The information in this script has been available in peer-reviewed literature since 1985. The USDA published it in 1992. The Royal Horticultural Society documented the underlying principle in 1894. None of that stopped $890 million per year from flowing toward products that require repurchase every single time it rains. Subscribe. Because the copper tape script is one of 11 similar investigations sitting in the research folder right now, each one following the same pattern: a sub-10 one-time solution, a multi-$100 recurring industry built on its suppression and a paper trail that goes back further than most people expect. The next one covers rust. Specifically, a $6 product used by the U.S. Navy since 1958 that permanently halts oxidation on any metal surface. And the $2.3 billion rust treatment market that erased it from consumer awareness by 1976.